Morning, welcome to Shir Torah Time. We are up to Perek Yutes, which is, we just finished talking about what the vision of Gog and Magog, or the eventual defeat of Gog and Magog, is going to look like. Now the Navi Yeshayahu is describing the final end of Mitzrayim. Now, you have to understand that Mitzrayim was the center of the world. Egypt is the center of the world, in the ancient world at least. And B'ni b'choyri Yisrael, when God says, I'm going to take you as my firstborn nation, it was like replacing Egypt. Egypt was the biggest economic power, it was the most innovative region in the world, and the Navi is describing what the end of Mitzrayim is going to look like. But we always have to understand it in metaphoric terms, that it's the end of Meitzarim. It's the end of constrictions. This is the end of how constrictions are going to look, Meitzarim. That every person goes through his own Meitzarim. The world goes through Meitzarim. Everybody's development is that he has to go through Meitzarim. And this is how the end of Meitzarim look like. Masa Mitzrayim. Hine Hashem roichev alav kol. God is riding on light clouds, which again in today's metaphoric world we would say he's flying on a supersonic jet, or he's flying through waves. The gods of Egypt are trembling in his presence, and the heart of Egypt is melting away. On a political level, I'm going to turn Egypt against Egypt. Which is really what the end of high and mighty kingdoms is, that they end up internally fighting against each other, and man fights against his brother, cities against cities, kingdoms against kingdoms. The end of, the downfall of Rome, the downfall of all of the great political powers, which are selfish and self-centered, is they end up fighting against each other from within, in fighting. And the spirit of Egypt will be broken. What happens is that Meitzarim, I'm just going to take this whole Perek on a metaphorical trip of, instead of talking about the land of Egypt, we're going to talk about inner Meitzarim. Just because it's geschmack to turn the prophecy inward so we can make it accessible, because when we talk about Mitzrayim, the ancient land of Egypt, we don't have a way to relate to it. It's almost like, so what do I have with Egypt? It's only when we translate it into their own terms. So what happens is that when a person has Meitzarim, a person has a problem or an issue, and then this problem feels threatened because you're going to evolve into a higher state of connection where you don't need that issue any longer. So there's a desperate, your old wiring starts to put up a fight, and it starts being doirish elu elilem, elu itim, elu oivez, elu yedoinem. It starts becoming desperate, like, hey, you have to understand, every time a person has an issue, so you escape from that issue with certain things. You can escape to alcohol, you can escape to drugs, you can always escape to something. And that escape gives you a certain burst of pleasure. It gives you a certain burst of dopamine. It gives you like a psh. And that's what keeps you going. Whenever you want to confront the issue, all of the gods, it starts being doirish to all of the gods, to all of the pleasures and the vices and the escape routes, start saying, you're going to lose me. V'sikarti es Mitzrayim b'yad adoinim. B'yad adoinim kosho u'melech az yimshel b'om ne'uma odoin Hashem tzivokos. And I will deliver the Egyptians into the hand of a harsh master, that's adoinim. And a strong foreign king will rule over them. Ne'uma odoin Hashem tzivokos. V'nishu ma'ayim me'ayom v'nor yechra v'yovesh. And the water will disappear from the Sea of Egypt, and the river is going to run dry. That means that every single klipa always has to have a place where it's yoinuk chayas. That means in order to maintain every problem or every bad habit or every negativity that a person has, it has to get fueled from somewhere. It has to be fed. You have to be able to feed that negativity. It has to get chayas from somewhere. So he's describing how the river, or the chayas, which used to fuel the Meitzarim, runs dry. V'heznichu naharos, dalu v'charvu yoyre matzot kana v'suf kamelu. Water is going to disappear. The rivers will be abandoned. The streams of Egypt will be diminished. The reeds are going to wither. That means all of the chayas that surrounded that are feeding into the issue is going to wither up, and it's going to shrivel up and die. Arois al yaoid, al pi oid. Arois al yaoid. All that's on the river and on the bank of the river is going to be disintegrated. Arois al yaoid. It's all going to fade away and disappear. And the fishermen are going to mourn, are going to that means all of the fishermen and all of the ones who cast the rod in the river are going to mourn. The ones who spread huge nets on the surface of the water, they're going to be miserable, which means there's not going to be anything to mine from it any longer. It means, let me say it in other terms, you could have a person, he lives off his meitzarim, he lives off his problem, he goes to therapy for the problem, and he cries about the problem, and he runs away from the problem, and he's angry about the problem. It's all not to discover a new way of being. And the geula is when the whole enterprise, there's a whole huge business around this problem, when it just shrivels up and dies, and it becomes nothing left from it. Uvoishu oivdei pishtim shirikes v'oirgim choirei, and all the workers of combed flax and the weavers of linen will be ashamed. Which is everything. The Mitzrayim had a whole industry was about flax and linen, and they made all different types of clothing. The whole racket around it, the whole business around the Meitzarim is going to shrivel up and die. It's like in today's world, let me give you an example. In today's world, one of the Meitzarim is, for example, that we need approval. That's a Meitzar. In reality, the reason why a neshama, the reason why we're good is because we're good. Just because. That's the real truth. A Meitzar, a common Meitzar that we all struggle with is the need for either approval and disapproval. So in the world of Mitzrayim, approval and disapproval is a huge industry. It's a huge business. Everybody operates around likes, that's approvals, and dislikes. We have a whole geschäft that if you get approval, you want more approval. You're drunk for approval. You spend your whole life looking for approvals, and then you spend your whole life healing the disapprovals. You're sitting by therapists and you're running away from the disapprovals, not only from other people, from yourself. Could you imagine when Mitzrayim dies, when this Meitzar dies, that you need approvals or disapproval dies, a whole industry shrivels up. When Mitzrayim dies, there won't be any likes or dislikes on YouTube videos any longer. There's not going to be any more this whole concept of buying better clothing in order to get other people to view you a certain way. It's not going to make any difference which car you're driving. It's going to make zero difference. You're not going to judge yourself based on. So the Navi is describing all of the trappings and all of the business and the whole around and around and around how it's dying. This is Gewalt Posik. This is where the Lashon Agmei Nafesh comes from. That means all the foundations will be crushed, and all those who make dams and pools that provide life. So Agmei Nefesh means, Agam means like a wellspring that gives life of water, but it also means Kol Oshei Shecher Agmei Nefesh. That's what Agmas Nefesh means, like depressed souls. So all those that create Agmei Nefesh are going to disappear, which is Mitzrayim creates Agmei Nefesh. But you know what the trip is? Agmei Nefesh means pools of water, but these pools of water seem to be a source of life, but really It's creating agmas nefesh. It's like, let's say you go to a person and you give him a compliment. You say, wow, I just gave him a spring of water. I gave him a compliment. But in reality, you just gave him agmas nefesh because he doesn't need any compliments. In reality, when we're in a good place, we don't need compliments in order for us to feel that we're worthy of existence. We're worthy of existence because we're worthy of existence. This whole world that we're teaching parents and mechanchim that you know how you're going to raise successful children, keep on buffering them up with compliments. You're creating cripples who need compliments. A real healthy person doesn't need a compliment in order for him to be. He is because he is. This is all part of the Mitzrayim that we create for ourselves. Halavai, we can be zoichet to create Teflon children. Teflon children who don't view themselves as less than when they get disapprovals, and then don't view themselves as having a right to exist because of approvals and because of all of the yeses. When we get these clips sometimes come around, like Tony Robinson, like you have to give poker chips to your kids. You have to fill them up with poker chips. It's like this weird, wacky game where the kids are going to be getting knocked down. Therefore, give them enough poker chips to battle to getting knocked down. It's like, no, I don't want, let me duvshach, let me uktzach. Don't give me a sting and don't give me a honey. I want to be able to raise children who are just content with who they are. So he says, the princes of Tzoyan, they're mere fools. All of the counselors of Paroi, they give him senseless and illogical counsel. He says, how can you say to Paroi, I am the son of the wise, the son of ancient kings? Like Paroi went around, Mitzrayim goes around saying, I'm so high and mighty and I'm so powerful. And when Mitzrayim falls down, you say, seriously? This was your wisdom? Your wisdom was that you were telling the world, give people compliments? That was your wisdom? Stop people from knocking other people down. These are all external mitzarimdik operating systems. Ayom eifer chachomecha ve'yagidu noloch v'yedu mayotz Hashem tzevokas al Mitzrayim. They said, like, where are you all now? Where are all your wise now? Where are all your wise men? Noyalu sorei tzoyan nisu sorei noif isu es Mitzrayim pina shvoteo. The princes of Tzoyan became fools. The princes of Noif were distracted, and instead of helping Egypt, they led Egypt in Gribaran by misleading the cornerstone of her tribes. That means the whole Meitzarim, all of the inner problems, issues that we go through, ends up defeating itself. Hashem Mosach. I'll give you another example of Meitzarim. Just a Narish example that you should understand. In the world of Meitzarim, we need things in order to be happy. So we live in an entire world that we spend our entire lives to be distracted from life in order to earn enough resources to buy more things which should remove discomfort. It's like we actually spend our entire life running away from living. Versus when the Meitzarim get removed and a person is just content just because is the essence of his life, he suddenly looks around and he says, you mean I was spending my whole life making infrastructures how to run away from living? That was all the wisdom that I made huge economies and I created needs for an entire civilized nations to need so many things, to need endless amount of things and to never be content with the minimum by believing that would make my life better. A person who's content with his life, he's way more content with the minimum. Because he's just content with the Metzias that he's alive. He doesn't need all these things. Hashem masach bekirba ruach ivim v'hisu es Mitzrayim b'chol maseo ki hitoi shikor b'kiyoi. He says, all this has come about because Hashem put into Mitzrayim a spirit of confusion, and all of Egypt and all of the Meitzarim gets stuck, it gets into a loop, and they end up falling victim like a drunk, staggers and evalget sich in his own vomit. Which means the end of running away from experiencing our life and running to Meitzarim and going through blocks and boundaries in order to finding solutions from outwards, is that we end up percolating ourselves in our own vomit, and we try to get out of it by percolating in more vomit. We say, okay, the solution to my problems are to have more money, more approval, more escapes, more vacations, and surround myself by more yes men. And on that day, it's not going to have any actions that's going to be able to save it. And that day, the warriors of Egypt are going to be like women, that they're going to be trembling from the catastrophe, and they're going to fearing from the waves. So this is like very this in today's world this wouldn't work, that you're comparing Mitzrayim like women, that they're more afraid, chas v'shalom. But anyway, the land of Judah will become a terror for Egypt. Which means that the Meitzarim was trying to squash Yehuda. And on that day, that's always what happens. Mitzrayim is terrified from the inner power and the inner essence that we have, because that's going to make it cease to be. And on that day, that one's going to tremble. On that day, when Egypt is going to collapse, there's going to be 5 cities in the land of Egypt speaking the language of Canaan and taking oaths to the Lord, to Hashem, which means that they're going to start taking over and going over into the belief system of the Jewish people, and that itself is going to cause them to be destructed. On that day, there's going to be an altar to the Lord in the midst of Mitzrayim, which means Mitzrayim is going to be the place which is going to be Meitzarim, is going to be the anti-God place. It's going to be the place where we run away from unity. And on that day, there's going to be an altar made for unification, for unity. And that structure is going to be a sign and a witness to Hashem. They're going to cry out that they should find a Rav, a Savior, should come save them. And then the Lord is going to be known to Mitzrayim. That's usually the end of the game. That when it becomes revealed to the problem, to the issue, to the Meitzarim, to the oppressor, suddenly becomes revealed. Mitzrayim gets to know God, which is ultimately the goal. And that day Mitzrayim itself comes to know Hashem and they worship Him. And then the Lord is going to inflict Egypt, and He's going to keep on healing them. This is a very interesting pasuk, that that the nogoiv, that the blows or the makas that it gets, is here to heal it. That ultimately the whole purpose of nogoiv is in order to heal the Mitzrayim. Hashem is going to listen to their pleas and heal them. There's going to be a highway from Egypt to Assyria, and they're going to serve the Lord together, which means the end of this whole process of Mitzrayim realizing, of caving into itself, and realizing that there's unification and there's one Lord and there's a higher purpose, that suddenly bridges start being built between cultures. This is a very fascinating pasuk, which is coming to say that there's going to be like a 3-way connection, like a triangle. And that means Israel is going to be a triad with Egypt and Assyria, which means they're all going to work together to become a blessing. That means the former enemies end up realizing that they were always one and the same. That the world is going to say, wow, blessed is my people Egypt, Assyria, and my inheritance is Israel, which means this is a description of world peace, where all the nations of the world, Egypt, Assyria, and Israel are all going to be serving the same purpose of realizing that it's Hashem Echad, and that's going to be the end of Mitzrayim, L'chaim.